It's time for episode 33 of the Mystical Times blog podcast with me, Michelle Eve. This episode is about the Crumbles ghosts and murders. When researching accounts of ghostly sightings, I look at the area in which the sightings happened to see if, perhaps, there's some correlation between a historic event and the entities. And in this case, it was revealed that 2 horrendous murders happened in an area of a popular holiday seaside town of Eastbourne. This is the dark history that could be behind the strange ghostly figures on the beach. I came across reports of ghostly figures being seen on a practically deserted shingle beach area called the Crumbles, that's in Eastbourne, East Sussex, to which the reporter remarked that those ghostly figures were that of a teenage female who was murdered in the vicinity. I took a more in-depth look at this area and the murder, only to find yet another murder had also taken place in a nearby bungalow. The first apparition was witnessed by a fisherman, Richard Prodger. It was in the early hours of the morning in December 1921. He said,
"The ghostly thing was dressed in a long black gown. It suddenly rose from the ground, right in front of me. And as I moved forward, it went ahead. And when I stopped, it also stopped. Its gown was similar to an Ulster cape and it reached right onto the ground. On its head it wore a large round hat. It did not walk but just glided along. Then as it got nearer to the huts on the beach, it just sunk into the ground and disappeared."
The second witness to an apparition on the beach was Mrs. Goldsmith, who was the caretaker of the Fishermen's Institute, but she saw something different. She said,
"It appeared between 2 of the fishermen huts and looked like a white cloud. It then disappeared as quickly as it had appeared."
The report does not state as to whether Mrs. Goldsmith had seen this during daylight hours or when it was dark. The first young woman who was murdered in the Crumbles was Irene Monroe, who was just 17 years of age and worked as a typist in Oxford Street, London. The year was 1920, and this was the first time she had gone on holiday on her own. She lived with her mother in London, and her mother had gone up to Scotland to visit some friends. Irene and her mother were very close, as Irene's father had passed away a few years previously. By all accounts, Irene was an independent young woman. She had told the landlady of her holiday lodging that she was off out for the day. She wore a smart jacket, skirt, and large hat for her day's outing. It appears she was accosted by 2 ex-servicemen who had formed for robbing the tourists in Eastbourne. One of these men was 19 years of age, and the other was in his late 20s. They were finally caught and arrested as a witness who was a sailor, saw them walking alongside Irene, and other witnesses saw 2 men, fitting their descriptions, running away from the Crumbles around 9 p.m. on the day of the murder. Irene's body was found the next day by a young boy who was running down towards the sea. She had died from blunt force trauma to the left side of her head and had been hastily covered up by the shingles on the beach. Both of the accused men blamed the other for the murder of Irene. Both men were found guilty and were hanged for their crime in Wandsworth Prison in 1921. Neither confessed to the murder before they were hanged. Another thing to mention was a small beige-coloured cat that was also found at the scene by Irene's body. It had been shot in its left leg, but went on to fully recover. There was another murder in this quiet area, and this time it was in a bungalow by the beach. It was in 1923, when 37-year-old Emily Kay was savagely murdered by her then-partner Mahon. He found out that Emily had substantial savings and went about to dissolve her of her money. He had lied again and again to her, given her a false name, and didn't tell her he was already married. He had also served a prison sentence for battering a woman around the head during a failed burglary several years before he met Emily. His wife had taken him back after he served his prison time. Emily was told more lies by Mahon, and it was when Emily became pregnant that Mahon became violent and murdered her. He chopped her body into small pieces and threw some of them around the local area, whilst keeping other parts around the bungalow. Mahon carried on in his deceitful ways. He had other women come stay with him at the bungalow, whilst he spent Emily's savings on his lifestyle. He had kept Emily's blood-stained clothes with the murder weapon in a suitcase, which he had stored in a lock-up at Waterloo Rail Station. Mahon's wife was becoming more suspicious of him and his behaviour, so she hired a private detective to follow him. Mahon was caught red-handed with the suitcase at Waterloo Station, and he was then arrested for Emily's murder. He said that he and Emily had fought, and she had thrown an axe at him, and then he said he had struck her and had tried to revive her, but she had died, so he panicked, and that's why he chopped her body up. When the case went to court, there was lots of evidence of him being guilty, that the jury took less than 45 minutes to find him guilty. He was hanged in Wandsworth Prison. It was in 1924 that the supernatural/paranormal investigator and author Elliot O'Donnell published a book called Ghosts, Helpful and Harmful, in which he visits the Crumbles bungalow and the area where Irene was murdered. O'Donnell, who had plenty of paranormal and psychic experiences, said,
I felt that the Crumbles area itself was haunted by several different ghosts and that there was an evil influence in this area, which for those who are easily manipulated, would cause them to bring harm to others.
There could be something in what he said, and the energy of an area could have a negative effect on someone, or could it be that some people are just led by their greed and will commit heinous acts upon others to make financial gains for themselves? That's all for this episode, and I hope you found this episode thought-provoking. For the next episode, episode 34, it's all about strange figures that haunt Tewkesbury and Winchcombe. Till next time.